My mother leaned in at my promotion party and whispered, "Don't expect us to support you anymore." I smiled for the cameras, but something inside me cracked. They were supposed to be proud. Instead, their eyes were sharp with something I couldn't name. I used to believe love meant sacrifice. Maybe I was wrong. That night, a surprise visit from my CEO shifted the air in the room, and with it, my entire understanding of my family. A secret was buried beneath this celebration, and it wasn't mine. What if success wasn't the reward, but the trigger? Champagne flutes clinked around me like tiny bells of triumph. The chandeliers cast golden reflections against the crystal glasses, and the polished floor mirrored the silhouettes of silk gowns and tailored suits. I stood at the centre of it all, my name echoing through the laughter and congratulations. My promotion to Chief Operating Officer had been announced just hours before, and I was hosting the celebration in my own home, a sleek, modern space I'd spent years building, both brick by brick and bone by bone. My mother floated in through the glass doors as if on cue, wearing a cream dress that looked more expensive than anything I owned. She opened her arms with practiced grace, smiled with just enough teeth, and pulled me into an embrace that felt oddly staged for the cameras. Her perfume was floral, too sweet, and it nearly smothered me. Then she leaned in and whispered, her lips brushing against my ear. "After tonight, you're no longer one of us." I froze. Her words slipped beneath my skin like a shard of ice. I blinked, still smiling for the guests, unsure if I'd imagined it. But when I pulled back to look at her, her face was a perfect mask of warmth. Before I could respond, she pressed a small velvet box into my palm. "This is yours now," she said, louder this time so others nearby could hear. "Our family heirloom, passed down to the women who carry our legacy." I opened the box slowly. Inside was the Mitchell sapphire necklace, a deep blue stone encased in gold filigree, something I'd only seen once when I was 6 and forbidden to touch. It had always been Daniel's inheritance to give his future wife. That was the unspoken rule. But now it sat in my hand, heavy and cold. "You're giving this to me?" I asked, my voice low. "You've earned it," she said, almost convincingly. Guests murmured appreciatively nearby, clapping lightly. I managed a smile and fastened it around my neck, the clasp clicking into place like a shackle. Later in the evening, the CEO of the company, Mr. Grayson, took the stage setup in the backyard, microphone in hand. He congratulated me publicly, praised my work ethic, my leadership. Then his tone shifted slightly. "And tonight," he said, glancing briefly in my direction, "we'll be sharing something else, a truth that's long overdue. But I'll save that for later." The words landed like a stone in my stomach. A truth? My mother stood beside me, but her posture tensed. Her fingers gripped the stem of her glass just a bit tighter. My brother Daniel, standing not far, narrowed his eyes, but said nothing. The energy shifted. Moments later, just as I was stepping forward to thank the guests, my mother's voice rang out behind me. "Let's get a family photo before we lose the light," she called, grabbing Daniel by the arm and pulling him forward. Cameras turned. Guests stepped aside. My moment, my acknowledgement, was swept away in a flash of white teeth and coordinated poses. I stood there awkwardly, one foot still toward the stage, before I was nudged into the photo frame like an afterthought. After the pictures, I stepped aside to collect myself. I barely had time to breathe when Daniel approached, slipping a manila envelope into my hands with an overly casual smirk. "We figured this was the perfect time," he said. "What is it?" I asked. "Just some housekeeping," he said. "Family stuff, since you're COO now." Inside the envelope was a 5-page agreement outlining a proposed financial redistribution plan. Essentially, a contract that would have me transfer a portion of my new salary into a trust fund managed by the family. The justification? To honour the legacy and support the sustainability of the Mitchell name. I looked up at him. "You're kidding." He shrugged. "Just business. You wouldn't have made it here without us, right?" My hands shook slightly as I folded the paper. "I paid for my own degrees, my own place. I even covered your rent 2 years ago." "That was a family emergency," he snapped. "I never got paid back because family doesn't bill each other." Before I could say more, I noticed Mr. Grayson across the lawn. He wasn't mingling or sipping his drink. He was watching. Not me, not Daniel, but my mother. His expression wasn't curious. It was calculating, almost sad. Something about that made my skin prickle. I walked away without signing anything. That night, as the sun dipped and string lights flickered on overhead, I stood by myself on the balcony. Below me, my guests danced and drank and laughed as if nothing had changed, but everything had. The necklace around my neck felt tighter than before. My mother's words rang in my ears. "After tonight, you're no longer one of us." I didn't know yet what truth Mr. Grayson planned to reveal, but I had a sinking feeling it wasn't his alone. I woke up the morning after the party with the taste of champagne still lingering on my tongue. But the celebration had long soured in my memory. There was something artificial about the entire night, as if the people I called family had only shown up to perform a role. One they'd long rehearsed. Their lines were flawless, but their eyes hollow. Sifting through my desk later that afternoon, searching for the contract Daniel had handed me, I stumbled upon a dusty cardboard box tucked behind some old tax documents. I didn't remember putting it there, which is why I opened it. Inside were remnants of a childhood I hadn't thought about in years. Drawings, a school report card from 3rd grade, a faded boarding pass to my first day at St. Madeline's Academy. Beneath those, folded neatly, was a letter with yellowing edges. The handwriting was unmistakable, my mother's. The envelope was addressed to the headmaster of St. Madeline's, dated the summer before I left home at age 11. I unfolded the paper slowly. The ink had faded, but the words carved their way into me. "Please ensure she is not placed in classes with boys. She has shown signs of being too assertive. Most importantly, keep her away from my son. The distance will be good for both." I reread it 3 times, hoping some context would change its meaning. But there was no mistaking the intent. My transfer to boarding school hadn't been for my education. It had been exile, strategically crafted and executed. The memory I had clung to, that I begged to go, that I wanted independence, crumbled. I hadn't chosen ambition. I had been removed. Later that night, I called my mother. I didn't mention the letter. I just asked her, carefully, why she sent me away so young. "You were always restless," she said with a hint of pride. "A girl like you needed structure. And Daniel didn't?" "Daniel needed his mother," she said curtly. "Besides, you had your books. You liked being alone." I hung up shortly after, pulse racing, every cell screaming contradiction. My mind spiraled into patterns I hadn't questioned before. The years I spent trying to earn love through achievements, the guilt that settled any time I stood taller than my brother, the voices in my head whispering that success was selfish. She used to say it all the time, success makes women hard, and no one loves a hard woman. By the next morning, I couldn't focus on anything at work. I called my lawyer, asked him to look into the deed of my home just to be safe. I had no reason, only instinct. What he found took the ground from under me. 2 years ago, a second mortgage had been filed against my property. My signature was on it. Except I never signed it. When I confronted Daniel, he didn't deny it. "It's not like we stole from you," he said. "It's a shared family investment. The funds were used to help Mum, for her medical bills." "Her what?" I asked. He looked away. "Don't be dramatic." That was when I knew it went deeper. Deeper than guilt. Deeper than gaslighting. This was theft disguised as tradition. Betrayal wrapped in familial duty. That evening, Mr. Grayson called and asked to meet at a quiet bistro. We sat near the window, rain tapping gently on the glass. He ordered coffee. I couldn't eat. "I'm sorry about what happened at the party," he said, voice low. I could see something was off. "Something?" I scoffed. He waited. I told him everything, the letter, the forged mortgage, the manipulation. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, he placed a folded piece of paper on the table and slid it toward me. "What's this?" I asked. "Your father's original will. He was my best friend in college. I was one of the executors until your mother had me removed." I stared at him, stunned. "She told me he died of a sudden illness." "He did, but before that he wrote a version of the will that's different from the one you've seen. I opened the document. My name appeared over and over again. Financial decisions, property, guardianship instructions. "She didn't want you to know," he said. I felt the betrayal harden into something sharp in my chest. "And why are you telling me this now?" "Because," he said quietly, "you need to know what's really yours and what's been taken." When I returned home that night, shaken but clearer than ever, I walked through the living room in silence. The house felt colder. I stopped at the mantel where old family photos sat in neat rows. One frame caught my eye, crooked, barely hanging. I reached out, adjusted it. Behind the photo, a folded paper had been wedged in the frame's backboard. I unfolded it with trembling hands. It was a birth certificate. Name, Abigail Mitchell. Date of birth, 2 years before mine. Mother Margaret Mitchell. Father Thomas Mitchell. I stared at it, heart thudding. I had a sister, and no one had ever told me. The email came in just after midnight. No subject, no sender, just a short message. "Thought you should see this." I hovered my finger over the video attachment, pulse fluttering like a trapped moth. Something in me said not to open it, but something louder whispered that I already knew what it would contain. I pressed play. Grainy footage lit up my screen, a cell phone recording taken from behind a half-open door. My mother sat at the edge of a sofa, her legs crossed, one hand swirling wine in a glass. Daniel paced in front of her, agitated, aggressive. "She thinks she's better than us," he said, "like her fancy job makes her special." My mother didn't argue. "She's forgotten where she came from," she said coldly. "Always reaching for more, as if more will make her worthy." Daniel laughed bitterly. "Let's see how worthy she feels when she has to crawl back." The video ended there. No context, no explanation, just confirmation. The betrayal didn't gut me. It calcified something inside. I had suspected. Now I had proof. They weren't just indifferent. They were malicious. Still shaking, I pulled the blanket tighter around me, trying to hold the pieces of myself together. My laptop chimed again. Another email. No text this time. Just a scanned document. Birth certificate. Name, Abigail Grace Mitchell. Date of birth, June 3rd, 1984. Parents, Margaret Mitchell, Thomas Mitchell. I stared at the date, 2 years before my own. My breath left my body in a single, shocked exhale. The name. I had never heard it spoken, never seen it written, no photos, no bedtime stories, nothing, but it was real. I had a sister, and they'd erased her. The next morning I drove to the county clerk's office and requested public records. There she was again, Abigail, a death certificate, issued 4 years after her birth. Accidental fall listed as the cause. The file was thin, too thin, no police report, no funeral notice, no hospital documentation, just a line in a system, quickly and quietly closed. On the drive home, the world around me blurred. The buildings, the trees, they meant nothing. I couldn't feel the steering wheel beneath my hands, couldn't hear the hum of the engine. All I saw was that certificate. I wasn't the first daughter. I was the replacement. That night, I sat in the dark of my living room, the house too silent, too still. The necklace my mother had gifted me at the party dug into my skin like a brand. I yanked it off and threw it across the room. It landed with a dull thud against the wall, the sapphire shattering on impact. Good, I thought. Let it break. Let it all break. Sleep didn't come. Not really. I drifted in and out of shallow dozes, each one pierced by flashes of memory I could no longer trust. My childhood reassembled itself like a puzzle with jagged pieces. Her voice whispering, "Be grateful you're here," the way she flinched whenever I asked about old family photos. The quick deflection when I once found a baby shoe that didn't fit anyone in the house. By morning, I hadn't moved from the couch. The email, the video, the certificate. My hands trembled just thinking of them. Then the lights flickered. A small, sharp blink. Then another. I blinked back. It wasn't the first time. Over the past week, the lights in my house had begun to misbehave, flashing for no reason, dimming at odd hours, flickering only in certain rooms. I had dismissed it as electrical, but now I wasn't so sure. Was someone watching me? I checked my security system, no breaches, no alerts, but the unease lingered. I wanted to scream, to call someone, to not be alone, but I was, by design. I had made sure of that. That night, I declined the final confirmation meeting for the COO role. My assistant was confused. "You worked so hard for this," she said. "I know," I replied. That might be the problem. After the call, I pulled out the old family photo albums, dusty, leather-bound, smelling like forgotten years. I flipped through them slowly, smiling faces, birthday cakes, beaches, vacations, but always just 3 people, me, my mother, and Daniel. No father, no Abigail. I turned page after page until I found a photo where something felt off. A picnic in the backyard. I must have been 5. My mother sat beside me, but the spacing was strange. Her arm reached behind me as if wrapped around someone cropped out. Someone who had been removed. I stared at it for a long time. Then, without fully knowing why, I tore the photo in half. The sound was clean, final. Next, I reached for the album's cover page, the one with family embossed in gold. I peeled off the photograph of my mother, smiling, poised, untouchable, and I ripped it into pieces. The sound echoed in the silence. Then I sat back and I cried, not because I regretted it, but because, for the first time, I truly understood what had been taken from me. The first time I walked into the therapist's office, I told her I wasn't here to blame my family. I just wanted to feel like myself again. She didn't argue. She didn't nod either. She just asked me, "And who is that?" I had no answer. So I started from the beginning, from the party, from the necklace, from the whisper, from the forged documents, the birth certificate, the erasure of Abigail. Each session I peeled back another layer of memory, of story, of conditioning. She handed me a journal and said, "Write what you're too afraid to say aloud." I wrote every night in ink that bled into the pages like open wounds, and I read books about narcissistic parents, emotional manipulation, gaslighting, family systems designed to isolate, to control, to guilt. I saw myself in every paragraph. Every red flag that once felt like love now glared with new clarity. I wasn't broken. I'd been bent into a shape that made me easier to manage. I wasn't the problem. I was the threat. One evening, after a particularly long session, I opened my email to check on work tasks. There, sitting in my inbox, was the anonymous sender again. But this time, the email wasn't anonymous. It came from a personal address I recognised, grayson.dulwowinfordgroup.com. Mr. Grayson. I clicked it open, heart pounding. "I thought you deserved the truth," it began. Attached was a scanned letter, written in cursive I immediately recognised as my mother's. It was dated 20 years ago, a note to Mr. Grayson, back when he was just an upstart executive, and I was a child. "You are to say nothing of Abigail's situation. Thomas is dead. The story will be what I decide it is. If you speak, I will ruin you." Beneath that, a handwritten note from Grayson. "I kept this because one day I knew you'd need it." My hands shook. The man who had promoted me, who had stood quietly at my party, who had looked at my mother with something deeper than disapproval, he had known, and he had been silenced. But not anymore. My rage, once wild and disoriented, began to crystallize. This wasn't about vengeance, not really. This was about reclaiming the narrative. Ending the lie that I owed them everything. I didn't. They owed me. The next morning I bought a small voice recorder and placed it in my coat pocket before heading to a family brunch I hadn't agreed to, but had been guilted into attending. I smiled, asked gentle questions, and let the recorder do its work. My mother, predictably, spoke freely. "Sometimes I wonder if sending her away was the mistake," she said, sipping tea. Daniel scoffed. "She came back, worse, always acting like she's above us." "She thinks love comes with conditions," my mother said. "We gave her everything." I wouldn't call everything just because she paid for my law school. She offered. My stomach turned. Over the next week, I gathered more. Screenshots of text threads with Daniel, scanned bank statements with suspicious transfers, emails from my mother to former board members at the company filled with subtle sabotage. Then came the final piece. I found it while reviewing old files Grayson had sent over. A legal memo buried in corporate correspondence between Grayson and the Winford Group's legal advisor, marked confidential. One line stood out. She has the right to reclaim Mitchell Estate in full once she turns 35. Confirmed per Thomas Mitchell's sealed addendum. I read it 3 times. The estate, the assets, the house I lived in, purchased under a family trust, held by my mother until I reached the age. I had turned 36 3 months ago. I should have been told a year ago. They hid it. Again, I called Grayson. I want to see the full paperwork, I said. You're ready then, he replied. What does that mean? I've been waiting, so had he. Later that afternoon, he handed me a thick envelope. Documents Thomas Mitchell had left behind. My father, a man I barely remembered, but whose voice now felt closer than ever. Inside were instructions, guardianship terms, a transition clause that required the guardian, my mother, to step aside legally after I came of age. She never filed the handover. She had no legal authority anymore, only control I had allowed. As I signed the papers to reclaim my rights, I felt something shift inside. Not power, not anger, something simpler, autonomy. By evening, I walked through the house with a different gait, my feet grounded, my back straight. This was my home, my life, and finally, I wasn't playing a role in someone else's story. I passed the hallway where the light always flickered and stopped. For the first time, it didn't blink. The first wire transfer left my account on a Monday morning. By noon, the rest followed. Savings, investments, real estate trusts. I restructured everything with a private advisor and moved it under a new name, my name alone. By evening, my mother's access codes no longer worked. Daniel's auto debits bounced. The shared account they'd drained for years now sat empty. Its balance redirected into a private portfolio only I could see. There was no announcement, no confrontation, just silence. Until the next day, when a courier knocked on my door with an envelope bearing the state seal. I tore it open and scanned the contents. Subpoena, issued by the Superior Court. Margaret Mitchell was under formal investigation for financial misconduct, fraud, and breach of guardianship terms regarding the Mitchell estate. My legal team had filed the motion quietly, as per protocol. I hadn't expected them to act so fast. I stood still, the paper trembling slightly in my hands. Somewhere beneath the shock, I felt something cold, not triumph, not revenge, clarity. It had begun. By midweek, the fallout gained momentum. Mr. Grayson, never one for drama, broke his usual silence and made an unusual move. He posted a public endorsement on LinkedIn. Proud to have worked with one of the most resilient, intelligent women I know. Sarah Mitchell isn't just an executive, she's a survivor, and now she's in charge. There was no mention of the investigation, no name drops, just support. And it exploded. Thousands of likes within hours, hundreds of comments, colleagues, former classmates, strangers. But it was the quiet ones that unsettled me. Anonymous profiles, accounts with no photos, users who hadn't posted in years, liking, commenting. Finally, she knows. It's about time. We were watching. I scrolled endlessly, heart pounding. Who were they? People like me? People like her? Someone even replied with a single photo. 2 little girls holding hands. The caption read, "Some losses are erased, some come back." I closed the laptop, unable to breathe. That night, I pulled up the photo I had taken of Abigail's birth certificate. Then I took a deep breath and posted it to my personal feed. Caption, "She was real and she mattered." But Sanway, I didn't tag anyone. I didn't explain. The photo went viral. Within 48 hours, my mother's reputation shattered. Articles surfaced, Reddit threads, testimonies from former friends and family acquaintances. Stories of manipulation, betrayal, and the decades-long illusion she had maintained. My inbox overflowed with apologies from people who'd once mocked my distance from my family. Daniel wasn't spared either. His investment project, one built on the Mitchell legacy, was flagged by ethics committees. Sponsors pulled out. He was removed from the program. By the end of the week, my mother called. I let it ring 5 times before answering. Her voice cracked. I didn't know it would go this far. I didn't speak. You don't understand, she said. I was trying to protect everyone, even you. I waited. I didn't have a choice after your father died. Everything fell apart. I needed to hold it together. You broke me to fix yourself, I said quietly. I'm not broken anymore. She didn't reply. I ended the call. For the first time in years, I slept through the night, but the story wasn't finished. The following morning, a small envelope arrived at my office. No return address, no stamp, hand-delivered. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten. I saw your post. I've waited a long time for someone to say her name out loud. Thank you. There was no signature, only initials. A.G.M. Abigail Grace Mitchell. I stared at the note for a long time, reading it over and over, each loop unravelling every certainty I thought I had left. Was it a prank, a trick, or something more? The handwriting didn't match my mother's. It didn't match Grayson's, but it looked familiar, too familiar. There was only one thought echoing through my mind as I folded the letter back into its envelope. What if she's not gone? The launch event was held in the same ballroom where my promotion party had taken place just months before, but this time everything felt different. There were no hollow smiles, no rehearsed embraces, just real faces, real stories. I stood at the podium, heart steady, and looked out at the sea of women seated before me. Some were executives, some were artists, some still bore the visible cracks of survival. But all of them had been silenced once. All of them had lived under the weight of someone else's script. And now we were rewriting. Today, I said, we begin something new. The Abigail Foundation isn't just about support, it's about truth, about reclaiming your name, even if the world has tried to erase it. Applause followed, but my focus shifted toward the back of the room. A woman stood alone, older than me by maybe a decade. She didn't clap, she didn't smile, but around her neck, glinting faintly beneath her scarf, was a sapphire necklace, identical to the one my mother had once given me. I blinked. When I looked again, she was gone. The next morning, Mr. Grayson called me into his office. His desk was cleared, boxes stacked near the door. "You're retiring," I said. He nodded. I stayed longer than I should have, but I needed to see this through. He slid a key across the desk. "It's yours now, not just the title, the company, the culture, what you build from here. That's your legacy." I didn't cry. I thought I would, but I didn't. Instead, I thanked him, and I meant it. He smiled, then paused. "Before you go, there's someone who left a message for you at reception." Curious, I walked down, expecting flowers, a card, maybe a note from a donor, but it was her, the woman with the necklace. She sat at a cafe table just across the street, sipping tea, hands folded neatly in her lap. I crossed over slowly, unsure what to say. She looked up as I approached, eyes soft and impossibly familiar. You've grown beautifully, she said. I sat down, unsure if the ground beneath me was real. Are you... She nodded. Abigail, she said, though for a long time I was called something else. I wanted to ask 100 questions. Why she left? Why no one told me? Why my mother had buried her instead of helping her? But she answered before I could speak. I wasn't well, not in the way the world understood back then. They said I had episodes, mood swings, but mostly I was just loud about the wrong things. They institutionalized you? She nodded again. It was easier for her to say I died than to explain why I disappeared. I swallowed hard. She never said your name. She couldn't, because I remembered things she didn't want shared. I closed my eyes. The puzzle was complete now. Not neat, but complete. We talked for an hour, maybe 2. I don't remember the exact words, only that she held my hand when I finally wept. Not because I was broken, but because for once I felt whole. Over the following months, I rebuilt everything, not the family name, that could stay buried, but a new structure, a new circle, friends who didn't need me to shrink so they could grow. A partner who celebrated my strength rather than competed with it. Colleagues who asked questions instead of demanding silence. I wrote everything down, every step, every scar. The book hit shelves under the title We Were Two. It became a movement. Talk shows invited me, panels, conferences. I didn't tell my story for applause. I told it so others could recognize theirs. One night, during a live interview, the host asked, "Do you ever think about revenge?" I smiled. "No," I said, "because revenge keeps them in your story. But healing? Healing writes them out." The audience fell silent, and I knew they understood. Because here's the truth, the greatest justice isn't exposing the lie, it's living like it never touched you,